Hey, friends, welcome back to another episode of One Great Question. And I am unreasonably fortunate with our guest today because I have no business knowing people this interesting, doing work this impactful. But as with most things, it's not really who you know, it's the friend who knows somebody else. And so Chris and I were introduced recently through a mutual friend, Jeff Goins, while we were all hanging out in the metropolis that is Franklin, Tennessee. It's not really a metropolis, obviously. It's a small, lovely town, but it has an unusually large amount of writers and thinkers and artists. And so Chris and I ran into each other there. So Chris, lovely to have you on.
Yeah, that was a very, very, very nice lunch we had with each other. And I remember, I think we didn't we walk around a mall somewhere? We walked around
Yeah, we walked
the
around the
factory, right?
factory.
Yeah, there
Yeah.
you go. That's right. Yeah. Oh, that's right. We were looking for a bag. I was wanted to buy a bag, I think, right? I do remember this now.
You
Yeah,
were
yeah.
heavy into leatherworks. You're like, I need to find a nice leather bag. Because
Nice
I think
leather
Jeff
bag.
had one and you said, oh, I need one of those.
Yeah. Didn't find the bag,
Yeah.
but did find ice cream.
Yes.
So
Which in my world, better.
everyone's a winner, as they say, right?
Yeah. That's right. That's right. Well, the thing that instantly struck me when you and I and Jeff were having lunch was this idea that, me being from South Africa, Jeff being from the Midwest, you being from England, and then converging in this spot, is that the world has, just gotten more and more and more interconnected, and then found out kind of the work that you were doing and the things you were doing for people in the business space, and then as a speaker, and then as an author, and helping other people become an author. So for those of us who may not yet have come across your work, Chris, I'd love for you to kind of share, how do you find yourself where you are today in terms of the work that you're doing?
So what I do today is I focus on working with leaders to become truly sustainable in whatever career path they're on. So whether they are business owners or C-suite executives, CEO, CFO, COO, that kind of thing, or even down to middle management, anybody really who's leading themselves in a team is the type of individual that I will now work with to make sure that they go the distance in not only business and their career, but also in life as well. But it's been quite an interesting journey over the last kind of 20 years or so running my own businesses. That's what I do today mostly. And I do it from the stage more than anything else as a speaker, but I also work with organizations privately. We do offsites and retreats, and I do private coaching and all that kind of stuff as well. But I mean, over the years, I've got to the point where, we had a team of almost 600 employees at one point in the Philippines at a call center facility. We had a large virtual assistant recruiting hub, which was both those companies had been purchased now and acquired over the last few years. So I've got nothing to do with either of those anymore. But then we've also had a company called Youpreneur, which was a personal brand education and kind of service-based business where we work with expert authors predominantly on publishing their books, launching their books, marketing their books, selling their books, and ultimately building a business around their books, right? So it's been a pretty much a bit of a smorgasbord over the years. But what I'm really passionate about now, Carl, more than anything else, man, is just making sure that the idea of hustle is not necessarily a bad thing. Like it's okay to throw a little bit of hustle in on occasion, but it's a season. It's not a lifestyle, right? So, and that's really kind of my major focus now is making sure people don't burn out before their time and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. One of the things I, encourage everybody to go follow you on socials. One of my favorite things has been, kind of learning about you from a distance after our encounter was seeing all of these beautiful pictures of birds all over your social media. And as an 8-year-old myself, what I love is encountering other people with what I would consider to be the whimsy and the hobbies of an 8-year-old.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, as you think about your work and making sure people don't burn out, in my work, it's similar in this idea of coaching leaders and owners around emotional intelligence. And part of it is like, don't lose the whimsy of kind of your 8-year-old version of yourself. And
Yeah.
so the first question we like to ask on the podcast is, what is something that the 8-year-old version of Chris would be shocked or surprised or in awe of the life that you're getting to have now? whether it's the size of your camera because you can capture those birds, or anything in between. So it could be personal, professional, the places you've gone, the things that you've seen or done. What's something that the 8-year-old version of you would be like, tell me more about that? That's wow, wow.
I think there's a lot, to be honest with you. That there's at least a handful I can probably pick up on, but I think one or two that really stand out. A lot of people don't notice about me actually in the mid to late 90s, really kind of like 94 through to around 2000. I was pretty heavily involved in the Hong Kong film industry here in the UK. Distribution, putting on live events. We had Jackie Chan over and Jet Li over and all these other great guys. And I would be going to Hong Kong a couple times each year, and I'd be on movie sets and shooting behind the scenes stuff on little camcorders for DVD releases and all this kind of stuff. I don't really talk about this stuff so much now, but looking back on it retrospectively, that was really kind of my first, foray into entrepreneurship, right? Like building things, and creating a community and all that kind of stuff. And so I think my 8-year-old self would find it pretty cool that I have some really, really quite special photographs of hanging out with these superstars like Jackie Chan and Jet Li from over the years. And I think my 8-year-old will kind of geek out over that. But also, I think, as kids growing up, myself and my brother, my father was a hardworking architect. My mother was an executive assistant. We didn't have a lot of money, Carl. I wasn't born into any amount of money in any way whatsoever. My father had to go in the 90s. He spent almost 8 years in the Middle East, Riyadh, Saudi, another couple of spots as well that I probably can't remember, and I don't even want to try and pronounce the names. Going out and working on sites and building these large, everything from large apartment blocks to office buildings and malls and you name it. He did that to be able to gain the money needed for us to be able to even buy our first home. And the first home was just a little 2 up, 2 down house just outside of Wimbledon, right? So not a lot of money, not a lot of holidays, not a lot of travel or anything like that. So I think the other thing that my 8-year-old self would be quite happy about, quite surprised to see, would be the sheer volume of travel that I've been able to achieve in my career. A lot of it for business, yes, but also a really good chunk of it for more kind of pleasure stuff.
Amazing. Amazing. And as you were building this kind of life that now gives you the ability to travel and see things differently than maybe the 8-year-old version of you would have aspired to, where did you start to pick up this idea from going from film in Hong Kong to then building businesses in the Philippines? What was the thing that was curious about that? What was interesting that you were like, oh, I wonder what that's about? How did you find yourself in those places in your 20s and your 30s?
Well, I do remember how hard my father worked. I really remember that. And I remember probably saying to myself at a pretty young age, probably 15, 16, 17, saying to myself, like, yeah, I get it. You got to get a good job. You got to get a good job. But I think pretty early on, man, I pretty much figured out I didn't want to have to work for somebody else for any longer than I really needed to. I always wanted to build my own thing. I always wanted to be able to, create and launch and sell my own things, right? And so, from service-based, offers and companies right the way through to digital marketing and courses, masterminds, events, you name it. That's the stuff that I knew I was pretty much called to do on it from a pretty early age. But life is weird, man. Like I was talking to a friend a couple of weeks ago at a dinner party, and we were talking about how like he's pretty burnt out right now, and he was saying like, I just need a break, man. Like I just need a break from all of this. And I said to him, well, you have to understand that you shouldn't have to break in order to justify taking a break. Or like if you're saying, "Oh man, I need a break from this," like you're already broken. There's something not working there. So equally, never wanted to get to that point. Unfortunately, I did, and it was a massive wake up call, and it led to the long haul leader being written. But yeah, from a pretty early age, dude.
Yeah. And then maybe you can take us down that path of going, I know that I want to work for myself. And one of the things that I jokingly, when I'm coaching entrepreneurs, I said, listen, the best thing about owning your own company is not having a boss. The worst thing about owning your own company is not having a boss. Because honestly, you know this as well as I do, is now you have 10 bosses. Every client becomes kind of a new boss, right? You're always putting out a fire for somebody else. So where did you find kind of your breaking point? And hey, I went after this thing. I started my own companies. I was there. And then obviously we know the beginning and the end of the story is like, I didn't want to work for somebody, so I started something. And then you have like the exit story, which, lots of entrepreneurs want. But what happened kind of in that middle, or maybe it was closer to the end where it's like, oh, I'm hitting that breaking point.
Well, actually, I've hit breaking point twice. Very early on, after just a few years of operating, I remember it very vividly. I've talked about it in my books before and from stage before, and in other interviews as well. It was very very late 2009. We've been going for a few years building. Like I've been going all out, man. Like 16-hour days. 6 cups of coffee. Just to be able to get through the days and everything. And I burnt out right at the end of 2009. And I remember myself and my wife, who went away for a little staycation at a beautiful island resort. And she said to me, we had just, by the way, we had just had our first $1 million year in terms of revenue, not profit, but in terms of revenue. And I remember saying, like, man, yeah, we made $1 million this year. This is great. From the outside looking in, everything was very, very rosy. But from the inside looking out, I was pretty much exhausted. I was done. And so she said to me, for us to continue building this thing, there's just no way we can continue doing it the way that you've been doing it. You've got to let go. And that was the big thing. I was holding on to everything, like a lot of early stage entrepreneurs do. They get going, they get, from the ground up kind of thing, get their hands dirty. They learn how to do a lot of different things. And because of that, they think that nobody else can come in and do it as well as them, or even let alone better than them, right? And so 2010, we hired 8 different people to ultimately replace me day to day. And that took us from 1 to 3 to 5 million. And we kind of floated around that 3 to 5 million for the majority of our 16 years before we were, acquired. And so I think the really big takeaway here from that first burnout, which was actually a pretty simple one to get over, was that you just can't be all the things to all the people all the time. That was a pretty major lesson. But then in 2021, again, I burnt out. And it was really bad this time. I was diagnosed with anxiety, depression. I was put on antidepressant meds for a year and a half. I had to take almost 6 months off work entirely. I was exhausted. And on the back end of everything, from a chems perspective, I was diagnosed with phase 3 adrenal failure. So ultimately, my cortisol was flatlined 24/7. And cortisol is your stress hormone, right? So it's supposed to start pretty high when you wake up in the morning, and it goes through this little loop through the day when it kind of slowly decreases over the day before the sun goes down. But mine was just completely flatlined the whole day. And so, this was a whole different ballgame. This took me a good while to get over. And I had to go through a lot of changes personally and professionally to get over it. And a couple of those changes were exiting from the companies, and kind of rewriting the rule book in terms of what the definition of success was for me personally. But here's the funny thing: through doing that, and through talking to a lot of my friends and peers and other people in a lot of different industries, and through doing my own research, I realized actually this was not only just my definition of success, like the idea of pulling back on things, not necessarily doing less, but just doing more of what really mattered and getting rid of all the stuff that kind of didn't. Um, there was a lot of people doing this, a heck of a lot of people doing this. And that's where the idea for the long haul leader came, because I couldn't find a book about this per se. So I thought, well, I'm just going to write the darn thing. I've done 2 already. I can do a third. And so that's exactly what we did.
Yeah, incredible. What would you say in 2026 that you would tell the version of you in 2021? What question would you tell him he's not asking? What advice around, hey, because in our work it's about great leaders are the most curious leaders. And when we're not curious and we're not asking better questions, we get stuck. And like you
Mhm.
said, now we're doing too much of the wrong thing, because burnout isn't doing too much. It's doing too much of the wrong thing, as you pointed out. So what question would you try and hand the 2021 version of Chris to say, hey, I think you should ask this question instead?
I think it takes me back, and this is, I know you're going to ask me later, so let's just do it now. The question that changed everything, just to keep the flow of this conversation going. I actually thought long and hard about this because I wanted to give you a really good real world kind of, I guess, reality check on this for me.
Yeah. The
Um,
one question that changed everything for Chris.
yeah, and the question I've asked on a number of different occasions throughout the course of my journey, right? However, it was my old friend and mentor, uh, who unfortunately is no longer around, Dan Miller, who a lot of people in Nashville know. He was a Nashville native. Um, I worked with Dan. I was friends with Dan for 12, 13 years or something. And I remember we were on a Zoom call with each other. This must have been about 2016 ish, something like that. And I was moaning because I'm British and we love to moan. And I was moaning about the fact that there was no peer group in the Philippines, and I was getting bored living in the Philippines, and I'd done everything there was to do in the Philippines. And don't get me wrong, Philippines, beautiful country, people are incredible. But when you were living there as an expat for as long as I was, you have really genuinely kind of done everything you want to do. And so I was moaning about that. And he said to me, "So move. You're not a tree. Like, you're not rooted there. Like move a little bit." And I was like, "Well, what would that happen?" And then he followed up with a question that he became pretty much synonymous with in the leadership world. And that was, what would it make possible? And that's the question that I answered back at that time. That actually led to us leaving the Philippines and moving back to the UK in 20. We bought a house in 2017, renovated it completely, moved in 2018. And then in 2021, when I got all that bad news, "Oh yeah, you got anxiety." Well, yeah, tell me something I don't already know, doc, right? "Oh, but you're also going to be on antidepressants and you've got phase 3 adrenal failure. You're going to have to make all these changes if you want to recover from this." And I could have, and I probably did, realistically, man, for a good week or two, I probably got even more depressed about the situation because, you know, realistically, I probably knew that I was in that spot, but I was kind of avoiding admitting it. Um, and then I asked myself the question, what does all of this make possible? And I started making notes. I use these amazing little pocket notebooks. I don't know whether you've seen them or not. I'll wave them up here. Field
Yeah,
notes.
field notes. Yeah.
I've been using field notes for well over a decade. And I started making notes one day in a coffee shop. And a lot of what I'm doing today came from that initial kind of brainstorm of what does this situation, what does this make possible? And so that's the big question, I think, that's probably, like, it's genuinely probably created more change and opportunity in my life than any other question I've been asked.
I mean, it's such a good one. What does this make possible? And as you're forecasting now into the future, what are the things you're adjusting now, or the questions you're asking now that are making the next thing possible?
I think, I'm in my early 50s now, and I know you're going to say, no, are you
No
sick?
chance.
Don't look a
No
day over
chance.
35, Chris.
No chance.
Um, I'm in my early 50s now. I have always said that, we have our company, Upreneur, which has just celebrated 10 years.
Congrats.
And thank you. Thank you. And I have always said that I want to turn it over to my daughter when I hit 55. She's been our COO at Upreneur for 2 years already. And so I got 3 years, man. I got 3 years to realize that dream of ultimately turning it over to her. And I think, that's a big focus for me. And I think it's a big driving factor for the decisions that I make day to day, the things that go on my schedule. And I'm a big believer of the old adage of, show me your calendar, I'll show you your priorities. I'm a big believer of that. My good buddy Mike Hyatt often says, if it doesn't get scheduled, it doesn't get done. And so everything that is important to me, first and foremost, gets put onto my schedule. And that starts number one now with me, selfishly with me. So whether it's exercise or whether it's cold plunge or red light therapy or a massage or a chiropractic adjustment or blood work, I do blood work every 90 days, and that changes my supplementation regime for the next 90 days to see kind of, how to be able to kind of optimize everything. Somebody called me a biohacker the other day. And I said, what are you talking about? I mean, I've heard the term, right? I didn't really look into it. And then I looked into it and I thought, holy crap, I'm a biohacker. But I thought I was just doing everything to kind of like get over adrenal failure. But no, I'm actually probably hacking a certain amount of biology, right? And so I think that's just the big thing, man, is like for me, is just to focus on these kind of what I call these little micro moves where things get better by 1% here, 1% here, 1% here. And if I can do that consistently and stay in that rhythm of
Mhm.
wanting to take off those micro moves, then I know a year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, I'll be in, best shape ever. Not just physically, but mentally as well. And that's a big important factor for me, obviously. And the
Yeah.
birds, you joke about it, the birds actually have played a very, very big part in all of this recovery.
Yeah. How so?
Well, so one of the things when I was diagnosed and everything, one of the things that I was working with a naturopathic doctor and nutritionists and things like that at the time, and something that one of them said to me really stuck out. I said, like, do you spend a lot of time in nature? And I'm like, well, I live in the countryside. I'm surrounded by it. And they say, yeah, but do you spend time in it? That's the thing, like actual time walking around in it. And I said, well, I take the dog out and, what do you do when you're walking around? Well, I'll listen to a podcast or a book or something like that. Okay. So this is what I want you to do, Chris. For the next 30 days, I want you to go out on your own, not with the dog, with nobody else, for an hour every day. It doesn't matter when you do it. It could be morning, noon, night, whatever it is, but spend an hour for the next 30 days out in nature, no AirPods, right? No podcasts, no audiobooks, just walking wherever. I mean, you're in the countryside, wherever you want, like forests or woodlands or nature reserves or whatever it is, and see how you feel after the month. Report back to me. And let me tell you, it was dramatic, Carl. It was dramatic how much change it brought about in such a short space of time. I think after maybe 7 or 8 different walks, I would come back from the walk into the house more restful, more content.
Mhm.
And I started talking to my wife about all these different birds that I was seeing on my walks. And she said to me, well, we got this old DSLR. Why don't you take the darn thing out, start taking photos of these birds so I can actually see them instead of just trying to imagine them up, by your somewhat, flimsy descriptions. And so that's what I did. I started taking this old camera out, and long story short, became a birder quite literally overnight. Did not see this one coming. I've always enjoyed nature and being outside. And, I was the 9-year-old boy that brought back the hedgehog from Wimbledon Common. My mother was mortified. My father thought it was hilarious. And, 2 nights he lived with us, Henry.
Henry the
And
Hedgehog.
Henry the Hedgehog, very imaginative name for a hedgehog, in a little cardboard box in the kitchen, 2 nights. And then he escaped from the
Yeah.
house, which means my father let him out into the back garden. But nonetheless, always liked nature, never really engaged with it purposefully, I
Yeah.
don't think.
Yeah.
But now I'm a very proud birder, and I talk
Uh,
about it. I talk about it with everybody that I meet, and I've got my lifer list, and I'm on eBird, and I'm doing all this stuff, and it's awesome. I love it, and it has brought about a lot of just stress-free, contented, um, you know, time and renewed energy. And I
mhm.
make time. I make time pretty much every day to go out now with my camera. Pretty much, yeah.
I think one of the things that you're solving in that is, I think one of the great tragedies of the time in which we live now is that most people like the idea of things.
Mhm.
don't actually like the thing itself. Kind of like you're talking about if you live in, beautiful countryside, but I'm in the car or I'm in my AirPods or I'm in my office looking out the window of the thing. I like the idea of the thing, but I don't actually like the thing.
Mm.
And I think this translates into our interior life then, right? Because we're so used to liking the idea of things. And also in our culture, criticism is much more elevated than creation. It's like it's easier to critique some things because it always has been as a human. That we are in this muscle of like, oh, I don't like that, or I don't like this, or this is fine, but I don't really love it. So that it engineers in our culture this idea that, well, it's dangerous to like something,
Mm.
to
Mm.
really like something. It's dangerous to become a birder in your 30s and 40s and then go, no, 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 I'm the business guy. I run multi-million dollar companies and I, coach executives. And they're like, no, man, you're on a slow walk with birds. And well, what will that say? I'm not at this age or in this culture allowed to actually like things. I can only maybe
Mm.
like the idea of the
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, I'm with you. It's interesting when I got into when I got into the hobby. Let's not go down too much of a rabbit hole here. But
Sure, yeah,
when I got into the hobby, I I was like, there's got to be a movie. I mean, there's a movie on everything,
yeah,
right? Like, there's got to be a movie on birding.
yeah.
And I discovered a movie called The Big Year with.
So fun.
Have you seen the movie? Okay, so Jack
Movie.
Black,
Yeah,
Steve Martin, and Owen Wilson.
yeah.
And what I love about this was the characterization of these three main characters. And there were obviously other recurring characters in the film. But I really, I remember watching it with my son, who also comes out quite regularly with me now, my 17-year-old. And is quite honestly a much better photographer than me, which is horrific to admit, but nonetheless. And I remember thinking, I'm between the extremely successful, almost at the age of retirement Steve Martin character, well, pretty much at the age of retirement Steve Martin character, and the slightly foolish character of Jack Black. Like, I'm in between these two characters, and I fell in love with that movie. I must have watched it 5, 6 times now, I think. But there's this recurring theme in the movie for Steve Martin's character where his team is trying to get him to come back into the office and
Hmm.
do these deals and, come away from doing his big year of birding and all this kind of stuff. And at the end of the movie, they say, like, do you really want, like, are you ready to go into the abyss? That's the line. Like, are you ready to hang it all up and go into the abyss? And he looks around at several photographs, I think, in his office, or there's flashbacks or whatever. And it's like him and his grandchild that's just been born, and him and his wife, and him and his kids. And I'm thinking, you know what? I am pretty much almost ready for the abyss myself. So I'm actually really happy to just do my thing. And you would be really surprised, actually, on how many people, when I get into this concept of birding with people and what it does for me from a mental bandwidth standpoint in terms of being able to switch off and recharge, some actually pretty deep conversations have taken place with some very, very successful people. So, yeah, I'm quite. In fact, actually, the other hobby that I have is bonsai. I've been a bonsai practitioner for a long time as well, and Michael Hyatt's daughter Megan is now into bonsai because of me. And so, it's one of those, you have these conversations, and before you know what's happening, you're buying a friend a book and going out and getting their first little baby tree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I think is also such a good encouragement to anybody listening or watching this, that anybody whose life you might admire a piece of, because it's very difficult to admire every piece of somebody's life, their wealth, their business, their family life, their physique, all these things. It's hard for somebody to, matriculate in all of those environments. But I would say that anybody who you admire has some sort of stillness practice
Mm.
where their life slows down. If you were going to put the greatest of all time when it comes to entrepreneurs who have like been married for a long time, whose kids love them, who seem to be very present. The person that comes to mind for me with that is Richard Branson,
Mhm. Yeah.
and was recently invited out onto Necker Island. Wasn't able to go, And so my friend who did go sent me pictures because he's, a jerk.
He's
Um,
no longer a friend. Yeah.
yeah. Uh, we're still good friends. We're those kinds of friends who are like, we're not actually friends if you don't send me this picture
Right,
and make
right, right, right.
right. And it's a picture of him just playing chess with, uh, with Richard Branson, and it was this
He's a
idea
pretty
of
mean chess player, apparently,
a
Branson.
mean chess player,
Yeah.
and it went viral a couple months ago because somebody, I think it was an athlete or a musician, somebody who you might go, oh, they're not like a top tier chess player, went and beat him, and it was like the highlight of this person's life, and Richard's like, all right, rematch right now. But it was this idea to me that what's so impressive about that is, there's billions of dollars on the line. There's always another meeting that you can have. And the people that I find I'm trying to learn something from always have a stillness exercise, which allows them to be more present to themselves. Because my thought around this is the greatest gift you can give yourself or anybody else is to be as present as possible right now.
Yeah.
Everything else is an illusion. The past and the present don't exist. And by the way, I mean that quite literally because Jerome, my brother, is a functional neurologist, and he's like, your brain doesn't know the difference. It's all one thing. Everything is the present. This is why, excuse me, when we have a very deep memory, like you and I were talking about before the podcast of Wimbledon, you growing up there, me wanting to go, and right now, if you smelled the lawn at the Old England Club, you would be there. You would be the
Sure.
8-year-old version of yourself immediately.
You
And
know,
it's also why anxiety does its number on us, right? Because it's forecasting what might happen. And so we're feeling the ramifications of something a loss we haven't
yeah.
even suffered yet. But our brain is going, I'm cataloging that currently as if it's happening to me.
Yeah. There were two, it's funny you mentioned the smell of the grass. I went to Wimbledon a number of different times as a kid. There was two, and it might not be the case nowadays. I'm not been since I was a kid, but there was two smells, very, very clear smells at Wimbledon. The first one was lavender because there's a lot of lavender around because of the purple color, right? So that one I want you to
Yeah.
sniff out when you're there. And the other one was strawberries because they're serving.
Yeah.
We're talking thousands of pounds of strawberries on a daily basis. It's insane. So I just remember these two things, incredibly. And it creates a kind of visceral connection to that place, that time, those memories, right? But to your point, the idea of just being very present in something that is not what you do
Mm-hmm.
day to day is incredibly challenging for most people. In fact, the majority of the very successful people that I know feel guilty when they take time away from building their businesses, running their teams, whatever it might be. It shouldn't be like that at
Mm-hmm.
all. It really should not. Society has led us to believe that burnout is a badge of honor. It isn't. It's a warning sign, right? And
100%.
so, I'm just a big, but like a week and a half ago, I was birding. There's one particular bird I could hear. It's called a Chetty's warbler, and it has this really high pitched, very, very loud song. But you rarely see the darn things.
Mm-hmm.
They're in the reed beds, like you just can't find these bloody things, right? And I went on a mission. I followed this sound for about 45 minutes to try and see the Chetty's warbler. And let me tell you something. I wasn't focused on anything else, Carl.
Yeah.
Nothing else was popping into my head. All I was doing was looking for movement in those reeds and listening out for the song. And guess what? I still didn't find the darn thing. Still didn't find it. But I can tell you something right now. I was all in
Mm-hmm.
on that me time at that time compared to being, mentally still in the office or whatever. So I think you make a very, very clear point, and I think it's something that should probably be the biggest takeaway from this conversation, if nothing else, at this point anyway. And that is to find something that allows you to truly have that white space in your day, because it can lead to a lot of really good stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wonderful. So for you, as it comes into this now season of you've got birding, you've got these other hobbies that are making you slow down like bonsai. you've got succession plans with your daughter, you're still, semi raising your 17-year-old, now more in a, mentorship advising season than we are when we're dads with young kids, because mine is still 10 and 12. So I'll be knocking on your door for advice very quickly. Because I do have a son who's like already interested in taking over the family business. It was actually quite funny this week. He said, I think I should start something here in the neighborhood just so I get a feel of what it's like. And this is my 12-year-old. And I said, all right. So I helped him like create a business plan, and we shared it out in the neighborhood Facebook group, and people in the neighborhood were giving feedback to it. And I told him, I was like, you're at this very sweet little spot right now, because for you to be 12 to 15, it feels like, oh, this is endearing and we want to help you. And so your product's going to get a lot of grace. And then after that, it's going to see like if it can sink or swim. But the joke when he was telling the neighbors that he was wanting to learn business is because he's, either preparing for the natural succession of curiosity of my company onto him, or a hostile takeover. He's like, I'll let dad decide. So Charlie's got a good sense of humor, and everybody did like you did. And it's like, all right, Carl, you gotta watch out. And I was like, no, I'll just give it to him. No hostility. It's all his.
He ain't taking it. I'm giving it. Right.
It's all his. It's all his. So I'm curious for you, and I'm sure the, people listening now with kids at, the same kind of seasons, as you look to the horizon, remaining present in the place that you are and planning for the place that you will be. What's maybe one question that you would give other people to ask maybe the next people in their life, whether it's in the company and there's a natural succession happening, or with your daughter, the COO, and you're like, hey, we've got 3 more years until kind of I hit a number, and then we'll decide, is that the number for you or for me, or do we move on, or what are we doing here? So what's the thing kind of rattling around in your head that's you think set you guys up for success when it comes to being able to
this is a very simple answer to this question, but all the best answers are always simple. I have started to answer a lot of, or I've started to ask this question quite a lot recently, both from a business standpoint with my daughter Chloe and Youpreneur, but also in kind of friendships and relationships in the house with my younger kids and whatnot. And that is like, how can I do better? Like, how can I make this easier for you? How can I make this more special? How can I make this more memorable? How can I do better? That sort of thing. And you'd be quite surprised at the types of replies that you'll get to that. Like, I asked my wife probably no more than maybe a month ago, and I said to her, we do the weekly date night thing, and we go away twice a year, just the two of us for a week or just under a week. We do all these things together with the kids, but how can I make the time we spend with each other better? Like, we already have a great time. Like, how can I do it better? And she said to me, you're already doing so much. I don't need you to do it any better. I just need you to carry on doing it. Like, the consistency, like stay in that rhythm, just keep doing it, kind of thing. Because it's one thing to do it for a short period of time, but we don't want to ever want to get to the point where we confuse a little bit of motion as momentum, right? And so I want to keep that momentum going with these things. So yeah, like, how can I do this better? How can I make it easier? How can I make it more special? Those are the types of questions that I enjoy asking at the minute.
Oh, I love that. And your wife, obviously, I know is very wise. And the thing that I love in her feedback of this was she was praising effort, not outcome. And I think the biggest mistake I see leaders making, parents making, friends, spouses, is that we will double down on praising the outcome. Great job on the grade. Well done getting the project done. And the client, we won the RFP. And what, lots and lots of good neuroscience has taught us is that we as humans respond over a longer time with greater vigor if we are praised for our effort. Like, hey, I love seeing the consistency. So let's just keep up all of that effort, because that's what means the most to me, and the outcomes will take care of themselves. And so I love that she has seen that and spotted it and built language around it, because that has to be amazing. And how long have you guys been together now?
She celebrated 20 years.
Oh, come on.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Man.
Clearly I'm doing something right.
Listen, hey.
I'm punching so far above my weight right now. I mean, I've always said that from day one. So I
Yeah.
must be doing something right. Yeah.
Well, the beauty I think of all great relationships is that both partners think the same thing, right? It's
Yeah.
like, oh man, I got the better end of this deal, and we keep on showing up because you and I both know after 2 decades in a relationship, there's no such thing as 50-50. It's like,
Mm,
listen, I'll show up and I'll give as much of my 100 as I can,
mm.
and in the words of Brene Brown, I'll let you know some days where I'm like, I got like 17%, so can we just like lower any and all expectations until I have more than this? But
Yeah.
the expectation is if I try and give 100 and you try and give 100, then the math will math, and this thing will be great.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, Chris, I would love to know from you what are places and ways that people can engage. I know there's books, I know there's speaking, I know there's. I wanted to come to your event last year and we couldn't make the calendars work. So, what are the best ways for people to come across your work and benefit from it?
Well, they can go visit chrisducker.com. You'll find a whole bunch of stuff over there, books and speaking videos and all that fun stuff. You can also subscribe to my newsletter, Future Proof, at the bottom of the homepage as well. And then, if they're interested in the Long Haul Leader, just go to longhaulleader.com or find it on Amazon, pick up a copy. And follow me at Chris Ducker on all the socials. Nice and easy.
Yeah, for all things wisdom and business and all things birding and bonsai.
I don't think I'll be writing a book on birding anytime soon.
I think
Um,
there's people with a lot more free time on their hands in that world who are writing those books. So I think that's probably wise on your part. You're still a little too busy to go and really influence the world of birding.
yes, just a tad, just at the minute. Yeah.
But maybe there's a future book on the things that birding taught me that I wish I knew earlier in my business.
It's interesting you say that. I was talking with a good buddy of mine who's a wildlife photographer, and we were actually talking about the potential of collaborating on a children's book, and trying to with me writing and him illustrating because he's a digital illustrator as well, and sort of trying to focus on the next generation of conservationists and nature lovers and all that kind of stuff. So I like the idea actually of maybe doing something. Like I like the idea of maybe doing like a little pocket guide of birding business rules or something along that, something fun, something
Yeah,
that if it only sells 50 copies, I'll
yeah.
still be equally happy that I put it out into the world. So you never know. And maybe that Chetty's warbler will be, that story will be in there in some capacity in terms of staying focused on the task and not being discouraged if you don't complete it. I have seen one once before a couple of years ago, but they are elusive little buggers, those Chetty
Elusive,
warblers, I tell you.
elusive. Well, Chris, I deeply appreciate the time and I appreciate the great questions you added to the thing. And most of all, I really hope you find your warbler.
Thank you, mate. I appreciate that.
All right, man. I'll talk to you soon. Cheers.
You got it.